We're back. Anyway, that's thought we'd do the second video on the restoration of that RCA Radiola that I showed you in a previous video. Got the chassis pretty well cleaned up. I did find that there was a couple of spots here of some rust that was underneath the tuning condenser. I've treated them a little bit so they won't continue. So she's stripped down, got all the bad wiring out of it and everything, and we'll be starting to put it back together here in a little bit. We'll start out with the heater windings. Now this is AC/DC radio, which means that it has no transformer. All the filaments are wired in series in accordance as shown in the schematic, and we'll follow their wiring. Basically, it'll pull through the heaters on the rectifier tube, and then we jump to the output tube, and then we just follow in line. This is the first RF amp, mixer, IF, and our detector tube, double diode, triode tube. On this also, the other thing is too, the chassis is floating. The only connection into the circuitry is right here, which I always do. This keeps any build up on the chassis, as well as keeping it from acting as a capacitive coupling between stages and causing feedback. So this little ground symbol here denotes chassis ground, as they state here. So that's chassis ground, and then B minus circuit ground. So we'll be running a wiring through for B minus as well as B plus and everything else. But we'll start off with, when we get to it, wiring the heaters in. Once those are in place, then we'll move from there and pick up all the grounds. Most of the cathodes go directly to ground. We'll get those picked up. We'll also, several of the tubes in this is shielded tubes. They're metal tubes, which means pin number 1, which actually goes to chassis for its ground. Pin number 1 is hooked to those shields. We'll get those tied in to the chassis and solder back in place. I still got to rewire the IF transformers. I got them apart, but I got to rewire them. Run new wires for them. And I think that's about it on this. I've been not only cleaning stuff up, but also getting the capacitors unstuffed. I figured I'd go ahead and stuff these. The few resistors that were out of tolerance, I happen to have in stock replacements that are carbon comp, so they'll look just like the originals. So between that and stuffing the caps, the radio will pretty much look original once I'm done with it. Something that I wanted to point out, that I meant to point out the last video, was the highly sophisticated technique of holding our pilot light in place, and keeping the wires held up in place. Now of course it clamps on, but the wires are kind of floating out there, and went over top of the up around by the tuning condenser, and they didn't want the wires flopping down in it and getting caught. So they used an extremely sophisticated and high-tech means of holding the wires up. and that is called a rubber band. And before anyone thinks that, well, someone else did that, or this is factory, and to show you that, I have the SAMs. The nice thing about SAMs, they take pictures, and hopefully you can see this on camera, but if you look closely, and if I can get it up here to show you in focus, if you look closely, right here is a rubber band. If you look real close, you can see how it's tied the same way, and it went up and hooked off of a piece of tab metal here that was off the front. But yeah, so that is definitely factory, that rubber band is. I unstuffed the electrolytic, and even, I didn't want to power this radio up anyway initially, and it would have caused problems if I would have, but the power cord was pretty well dead shorted. The insulation was gone on it. But this is the electrolytic, and if you can notice that it's about as dried out as it gets. So that's about one of the worst ones I've ever pulled out and seen. I mean, of this style anyway. So it would have been, at the very least, it wouldn't have had no capacitance, and more likely a tremendous amount of leakage, if not dead shorted. I have transformers. Their wiring is, some of it's kind of there, but a lot of it's pretty hard. These are not hard to, they just glue down or solder down in. They're not wrapped around or anything. You just heat them up, heat the solder up, and it just pulls right out. All the connections. This is the second IF, so it's got the two filter caps right underneath the trimmers, and located primary underneath this one. That's why it appears so many different layers on it as compared to this one. Let's see. Trying to think what else. Well, at this point, I'm not sure. So, what I thought I would do is I unstuffed all but two. I thought it just, even though this has been shown, I think I did one or two. I know Bob over at B. Anderson TV has shown this technique of heating them and unstuffing them. So, but it might be of interest. So, we'll see if we can get this on camera all right and everything goes fine. Usually a lot of times stuff on camera doesn't do too good. So we'll start heating up the cap. I like to heat it up a little bit and then wipe off the outside wax first before I get really carried away trying to heat it up to pull the cap out. So it really kind of makes it look a little better, but also I'm not as likely to be dropping a bunch of wax into my heat gun. So now we'll just start slowly heating the ends up as well as the rest of the cap. Keep it moving, don't hold it in one place too long or they will burn, and just keep going at it until you see the wax on the end start melting pretty good. Which it's starting to do now. And that's it. We just kind of wipe it off. and voila. And this is what's inside. We'll do another one. This one don't have a lot on the outside, but a little bit. I had someone watch one of my videos that I was where I was showing techniques of stuffing paper caps as well as some plastic encased ones, and they wrote in that that's unnecessary. Well, true, it is unnecessary, and you don't have to do this. When I've got a radio or TV or something that has all the excuse me, have all the original caps in it, nothing's been really replaced, and especially on radios like from the 30s, where you would see, like in Philco and RCA and Admiral and some of those, that would have literally branded caps in them. You know, they'll say Philco or the RCA or whatever. A lot of them would have a part number and stuff. They don't like doing it just for looks, but no, it's not necessary. You can put the brand new caps in. You don't have to restuff them. It's just something that some people do, and it's not that difficult to do on most of them and stuff. Well, let's see. Got everything else pretty well cleaned up and ready to go. On the next video we'll start wiring and stuff. I don't know if I'll get to actually run any wire. We got the volume control and power switch. It's all cleaned up. Band switch is all cleaned up. So everything is actually ready to go except for doing the wiring on the IF cans and getting that done. And I probably really can't think of anything else. I hadn't actually got myself set up. Something I want to talk about, and I'll talk about it again on the next video on this, is, you know, there was a big shield set here. That's what was soldered here, and I got it sitting around here somewhere. And then you've got various solder points inside, hooking up grounds. One thing I wanted to talk about was soldering to these. Now, a regular soldering iron, such as like I got the Hacko, 60 watt variable, but this tip is so small that the minute, no matter how hot it is, the minute you touch, the heat's gone. You can use pencil style irons, or not pencil, but pistol style irons. You can get 100 watt, 150 watt, 250 watt. The biggest ones, the 250 watters, has got just enough mass that you might be able to solder in here. There's other irons. I've got a couple. These two, I've shown them before. This one's 100 watt. This is a Sears and Roebuck. It's almost impossible to read on the handle. This one here is a Weller, 150 watt. And they both work great. But what makes them work so well is they've got a mass, much larger mass than any other type of soldering iron that's in here. And this goes quite a ways down inside. The other thing too, this right up in here, the heating element's back here. This up in here also adds to that mass and heats up as well. So you end up, once they're fully heated up, with an extreme amount of mass, thermal mass, that when you actually go to solder, it doesn't lose its heat. It will go ahead and it'll have plenty enough thermal available heat to heat the whole area and keep the soldering flowing. But the thing I want to point out about these is, if you ever get one and it seems to be heating up, but you try soldering with it and it's not really doing much, these are intended to take at least 30 minutes heat up time, and actually a little longer would be better. In fact, this one here somewhere, when I bought it, it actually came with the manual, and I had to put a new cord on it. It had the old cloth wired cord on it, and it was pretty bad shape. And I couldn't find the manual. I tried looking for it. I've got it put up someplace. But it says in the manual, 1 hour. Let it heat up 1 hour before you use it. Now, I generally don't. I usually start using them in a half an hour or 40 minutes or something like that. But the longer you let them heat up, they are heating up quite a bit of mass. So you want to make sure it's fully up to temperature, and then you want to add some good solder. Clean the tip off. You can just use the same sponge that would be on the soldering here. In fact, that's what I use. And clean it up and then wet the tip good. In other words, add some fresh solder before you start soldering. If you let them heat up at least a half an hour before you determine whether it's a good one or not, and you should be able to, without any problems, if they're working good, melt solder on any size chassis and stuff. If you do run into a problem, maybe the soldering iron's working good, but it's more thickness of the metal than size, because the heat will only transfer out so far, and then it just basically stops. It slows up. But if you got something, for some reason it's a pretty thick mass and reasonably large, and you're having a little troubles heating it up, if one or two things, if you can able to put it in your oven and heat it about 350-400 degrees in the oven, as long as there's nothing else on there that can be harmed by doing that. That's one idea. The other idea is use your heat gun. You can heat the area up as long as you're not blowing onto things such as delicate coils and stuff like that. But if you're like heating down in here, these are Bakelite sockets, so they can handle quite a bit of heat. I wouldn't put them through a tremendous amount of heat, but they can take quite a bit. But you can heat the area up, and that will help too. If regular chassis is not going to give you any troubles, but if you had something that for some reason it was real heavy gauge material. Oh yeah, one other little thing. On the next video, that's one thing I want to do, is get these grounds in here before I wire anything else in, and I hadn't got around to thinking ahead enough time for this video to actually plug these in and get them heated up. I don't know if you notice this very well, but these are speckled, and to best my memory, I think I remember seeing one other, but I thought it was a lot newer socket and something Might have been TV or radio or something that had speckles in it. I don't remember seeing octal sockets this old having speckles actually in them, and they're in them. I don't know if you can. It's not dirt, trust me. And so they shouldn't do that to an old man like me. I was sitting there trying to polish one of these up, trying to get it clean, and realized, no, wait a minute, that's actually in the Bakelite. That's actually made in there. I'm not sure why they did that. I mean, you know, once the radio's all together and the tubes are in there, you're not seeing the sockets hardly at all. So I don't know why decorate them, but I thought it was rather interesting. So anyway, I managed to make this last longer than what I intended. On the next video, we will get to actually starting to do the wiring, because everything's basically cleaned up. We'll start stuffing caps, and I'll show you techniques on doing that, or at least my technique, and we'll go from there. Again, like I said, once I get the ground soldered in, and then the next thing will be running in the heater leads. They'll be just jumping one tube to the next, to the next, to the next. It's all series strung, so you just go from one tube to the next tube to the next tube, and then putting in the base grounding wires that need to be in there, and then we'll just start building up from there. So I want to thank you for watching, and be looking for the next video on this. I know it wasn't a lot of information on it today. We didn't do much, but I promise on the next one we will get to more on it. So and I'll show you how well these can work soldering and stuff after you allow them plenty of time. Give them at least a half hour, if not more, 45 minutes to an hour to heat up and stuff. And the other thing too is, if you can get these screws out, sometimes you can't. This one I cannot budge. This one I can. It's advantageous to take these out and kind of clean them a little bit, because the cleaner the metal is, the better it conducts heat. So you want all the available heat from the heating element to finally get in that tip. So you know, keeping them nice and clean. Kind of show you something here, since I can't, and you want to keep them tight. So that's the tip. It's a heavy copper plated tip. And I just kind of sanded a little bit, just kind of filed it just a little bit to get a little shininess to it, and did the best I could inside. And they just sit in there, and we just tighten them down. Good and tight. So anyway, I'll thank you ahead of time for watching, and thanks for your comments. And if you have just stumbled across my channel or whatever, this is the first time you're seeing me, I do both restoration videos. This one will be a long series, because we're going to go piece by piece as we go along through it. So if you like what you see, I also do theory and stuff on that, on the theory of operation of these. So if you like what you see, please subscribe. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. And I'll see you guys on the next video. So you have a good day today, and have a good weekend. Thanks again.